focus on development of emergency medicine training programs in developing countries, particularly the focus in Vietnam, which is where we do a lot of our work. In addition to the work that I do internationally, I have worked very closely locally with the Salt Lake City homeless population. So I've been employed at the 4th Street Clinic for the past 5 years, where I work as a provider. And in my capacity at that clinic, I've also worked to establish resident and student electives and rotations at that clinic. And currently am working with the clinic to kind of revamp and reestablish their street medicine outreach program, which should be very exciting. So, for me, wellness is an incredibly important topic, not only in my role as an emergency physician, which is a very, very high stress, taxing environment, but also working with what can sometimes be very challenging patient populations at the homeless clinic, dealing with patients with not only incredible adversity that they're confronting, but also lots of mental illness, lots of substance abuse that can really complicate and challenge the delivery of healthcare. And so finding ways to integrate wellness into my own life has been absolutely important to me. So happy to be part of this panel. So thank you, Katie.
Thanks.
I can go next. So my name is Josie Mosman. I work at a rural health clinic in Bicknell, Utah. I am the clinical manager, nurse director here at the clinic in Bicknell. We also have 5 other sites that we manage. We're about as rural can get. Our closest hospital is about an hour away, and so we also have a 2-bed emergency room. I guess if you could say we're not considered an emergency room, but we do stabilize patients to get them to definitive care. Just because we are so far from the closest hospital, and we staff about 80 employees through our different sites. So defining wellness for me, this is something that I've had to work really, really hard for over the last, 2 or 3 years. I think as healthcare providers, we kind of put our own wellness aside or our coworkers' wellness aside to take care of our patients sometimes. And especially right now during COVID, our personal wellness has really been compromised. And so finding ways to emotionally support ourselves through this time has been interesting, difficult, and a success. So, yeah.
Great. Looking forward to hearing more about that. And you truly are like living this rural life, Josie. Wow.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I'm Beth Howell. I'm an addiction psychiatrist, addiction medicine specialist. I work over at Huntsman Mental Health Institute, which used to be UNI. And also, like right now, I'm sitting over in the main hospital because we have an addiction consult service and some really sick patients, some of which, Mike, I'm sure you probably have seen some of these patients, and trying to just, try to address the addiction that underlies so many of our health problems out there. And about 6 years ago, some of us started to work with a lot of different providers down in Southeast Utah. So since then, I've made many trips to Southeast Utah with residents and fellows. And then last year, I got a HRSA Addiction Medicine Fellowship grant and have fellows that are going, into rural, tribal, and underserved areas to work with addiction and learn it there. So that's some of my experience there. Wellness, I have to say that, I'm one of those people that always put mine last until I'd say the last, several years, but I've had to learn that doesn't work. have to put on my own oxygen mask before I can help other people. And I was on the medical board for about 8 years, and I saw how when you don't put your wellness first, how disastrous that can be for people, and at least physicians. And I know for other professionals too. And sometimes I felt like, gosh, I could have seen the train coming down the track like at this point, but that person didn't make a choice to protect themselves and to care for themselves. And they might have been able to avoid some of the disasters that happened. But at any rate, so I've become very focused on, wellness. It's not just that I want to treat people when they've already wrecked the train. And it's better to prevent that before you get to that point. So I can say a lot more about that. But that's kind of an overview.
Yeah. Well, and looking forward to that, truly, because physician, heal thyself, right? Which I'm hearing themes of that. It can be quite difficult. Just to get a little off the cuff, why do you think that is? Why is it so hard for medical providers to prioritize their own wellness?
So I think there's a couple of factors that go into that. I think there's a personal component, which is many people are drawn to medicine out of a sense of altruism, and we tend to, at least for the most part in our careers, really try to put our patients before ourselves and our careers before ourselves. I also think there's almost, I would say, a malignant component to the culture of medicine that I feel very strongly about, which is it's a career, especially in academics, that will take and take and take and take and take without giving much back. And if you're not careful, you can really let it just kind of devour your life and devour your time and devour your freedom and your sense of balance. And I think that's something to be very aware of and very careful of being a physician. So I think there's kind of that twofold issue. One, that it's probably a component of our personality types as physicians, and two, it's a career that is highly demanding and asks a great deal of sacrifice, and it's very easy to neglect yourself amidst all of that.
Yeah, very conflicting, or holding this like tension.
Yeah, I would agree with Mike. In a rural setting, we wear a lot of hats. I'm not just the nurse manager. I'm also infection control and emergency preparedness and QI. And there's a lot of demands that all of that puts on us. And I think our work sometimes can hinder us looking at our own personal wellness because it's just so demanding. So I really agree with what Mike said on that aspect. So
yeah, I would echo that. And also the other thing that I've seen a lot in the work that I do with addiction is I'm just really amazed at how many people who go into medical fields, physicians, nurses, respiratory therapists, who you name it. A lot of us have come out of, I don't know, this is kind of a, dysfunctional families, but then there's a lot of addiction in families of people who go into medicine and or dysfunction of other kinds. And I think what happens is you kind of get along in life by becoming kind of the hero or the heroine of your, not the drug heroine, but the female hero of your family. And there's lots of high expectations, and you're living out, like, getting out of this family, I'm going to, show that I can do things differently and that sort of stuff. And that's not true of everybody. I mean, certainly there's not everybody I work with has a history of addiction in their family, but there's something that we're all trying to excel at. There's a reason. And I find that we all have reasons for doing what we do that are surface reasons, but then there are a lot of unconscious reasons that we do it. And I'm always amazed to find that, if I ask somebody, why do you want to go into the addiction field? And, oh, it's interesting, I can help people, et cetera. But then there's like a brother or a mother or a grandfather or a friend who overdosed or something like that, that is kind of the crucial moment that they made a decision to do this kind of work. And I don't think anybody gets to medicine or nursing or any of these fields in general, and especially not mental health or addiction, without having some kind of seminal event or, stressor that, and I think it goes also with, why do people go into cardiology? Well, then you find out that their favorite grandparent died of heart disease. And so I think we have to be aware of our unconscious drives and why we may be living out some kind of tale that we're not even really conscious of. We have to just know that that's there. It's nothing wrong with it. It's just, we have to know it's there.
Oh, I love that. Speaking to my therapeutic heart, kind of this, this recognition of why we do the things we do and what drives us, truly like that self-awareness. Thank you. Well, kind of moving into a more formal questions of, how have your experiences in the rural global settings supported or hindered your own personal wellness? I know we're kind of like touching on the malignant, perhaps like culture, the roles people feel like they need to play in their lives. So what else can you add to this, even your own personal experiences?
For me, some things that have supported my own wellness is because we're such a small community, everybody that we work with are really family. It's not people that we just come and we work with and then they're gone. These are people that we go to the movies with afterwards. Well, when the movies are open, we go to the movies with. These are people that we can lean on for support when our own personal wellness is struggling, or that they can come to us when their own personal wellness is struggling. Hindering is the fact that we have to do it all. I mean, that creates a hard balance for us in rural communities, is trying to find out when work ends and our personal wellness begins.
So I'll preface a lot of what I say with the disclaimer that I'm a practicing Buddhist, and so a lot of my philosophy is informed by that. In my particular work with underserved populations, I'm very well aware that these are individuals that a large majority of people are biased by and even repulsed by on various conscious and subconscious levels. And it's amazing how quickly we can kind of consciously and mentally deprive another individual of their humanity based on stereotypes. And one of the things that I really try to carry into my everyday practice, whether that's in the ED or with patients at the homeless clinic, is that every single patient encounter, every single interaction is a chance for me to practice care and compassion and love. It's a challenge, right? And I may fail many times. I may fail miserably at times, but the opportunity presents itself, and every opportunity is a chance for me to try to challenge my own projections and my own biases, and to set them aside. And the more you do that day to day, the less solid they are, the less truth or strength they seem to kind of hold. And I know that's a little esoteric sounding, but when you really work on breaking down those barriers and those biases, and you really work to try to connect with a person that you may initially be a little afraid of or feel negative towards, you oftentimes find that that connection is possible, and that your biases maybe didn't hold as much sway as they should. And so, to me, that's been something that I think sustains me in a way, is knowing that every opportunity I have with a challenging patient is not only an opportunity to connect with that person, but an opportunity to challenge myself and to work on my own kind of biases.
Yeah, I want to echo that, because working in addiction, I work with people who are stigmatized, even if they're rich CEOs that are addicted to alcohol. I mean, but especially people who are really, homeless, or somehow other, challenges that they have in life. And I think that the way we deal with that pain and that discomfort is to dehumanize people in medicine. And it's a constant, I think, work for me and and helping other people realize, this person is homeless, but they have a life and a story, and they're a person, and that kind of thing. And I have some friends who've been homeless and out on the street for, a couple of years at a time, and they're doing well now, but that was their life for a while. So I know the possibilities, and I think having that longer view versus looking at somebody in the moment and thinking that that's the only thing that's them, is really important. But to have that longer spiritual view of what we do is is essential, basically. And the way that I think about it for myself is that I think a lot of people go into medicine or nursing or whatever, and they think of it as, I'm going to help people, I'll be a healer, or whatever it is, that's some sort of a, more lofty goal, more aspirational goal. And then when you get bogged down in the inhumanity of just the training and the relentless schedules and all that sort of thing, it's easy to lose that. And so I've often said, yeah, I went into medicine to be a healer, and it took me 20 years to get back to that, or, something. I don't know how long it was, but it was a while. And in that time that it took to get back there was a lot of misery and a lot of, burnout and things like that, wanting to leave the field of medicine, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm happy that actually there's more attention paid to wellness now, because there was certainly no attention paid to wellness back when I trained. And you're just supposed to suck it up and move forward. And we know what can happen with that. There are many things. Like I had a relative in the hospital a few years ago, and so when I was visiting, I sort of came around a corner and almost ran into a physician that was, I think, an attending. I don't even know this person. And I thought, oh my God, that person looks like they're suicidal. They look so depressed. And I thought, nobody is helping them, and it was like not my place to say, are you okay? But I really felt like that person, whoever they were, needed that. And my guess is, if I can see that there's something going on that is not healthy for them. So I think and this was before we had any wellness, sort of initiatives, or maybe at the very beginning. It was very early in the process. I hope that's going to change.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate your all's kind of connection to spirituality and the importance of like connecting with community. I was thinking values when I'm like listening to you. Like it sounds like this work is the hope is daily like connecting with your values. Whether that is like tapping into your community and seeing each other like a family. Josie, I think that's really beautiful. Or, you know, Mike, like the importance of witnessing people who other folks have a lot of biases against, right? Or, you know, Dr. Howell, like witnessing each other. But as you were all sharing, I kept thinking in my mind, I want to ask you about boundaries, because they're important. Boundaries keep us safe. I want to make t-shirts and give that to everyone so we can all have that message constantly. So in situations where things get kind of fuzzy, and Josie, I am really kind of thinking about you too. Like, how do you maintain boundaries around like your wellness, your health, or even just your life?
Yeah, for me, that's been really, really difficult. And it's taken a long time for me to be able to create boundaries. I'm a very type A personality and I don't like giving up control. I like to just work hard and get it done. And, over the past 2 years, we've moved more to a team-based model here at the clinic, and which has allowed me to give up control without giving up control. And so I think that that's been really, really important here is, for me personally, is allowing people to take on projects or take on things that would normally just be adding to my plate. It's been a hard thing to let go of some of those things, but I think that that's important. I think as far as boundaries go, it is important for us to have those even with our family, friends at work. Sometimes some of the emotional things that they bring to you as a friend or a family, as somebody that you consider family, is pretty heavy. And then that's adding to the heaviness of what you're seeing with your patients. And that can be really, really hard. And so I think creating those boundaries there is so important.
Thanks. And tricky.
Yeah, so Katie, I'll agree with you. I think the topic of boundaries is an important one. Ultimately, what we're all kind of looking for is longevity in our careers and a satisfying career. And some of these things are just a constant chore and task of the profession that we have decided to take on. And the concept of boundaries is something that I've thought about a great deal over my short career and continue to think about on a daily basis. And it's something that continues to evolve. And I think the more you know and understand yourself and your own limitations, and the more realistic you are with that, the easier it is to set and establish boundaries. You can't go to work every day and internalize every patient encounter. I think there's a nobleness to the vision and ideal of being entirely compassionate and empathetic human being. But, we encounter immense amounts of psychological and emotional trauma over the courses of our careers, we're kind of regardless of the field that you're in. In my case, I'm going from one room where I may have just run a cardiac arrest and had the patient die on me, and then going into another room and having to talk to somebody about, a simple laceration, or have someone that's there in a crisis. And, being able to bounce between, those modes can be challenging. And I think that part of the practice that has helped me is just, first of all, acknowledging the trauma that I may encounter on a day-to-day basis, not denying it, not bearing it, not hiding it, not ignoring it, not thinking that I'm so tough and can get through it all. And then finding a way to release that trauma, right? You don't need to carry it around with you. And I think as far as kind of standard methods of how you deal with that, whatever it is that brings you joy, whether it's laughing, whether it's reading, whether it's cooking, whether it's embodiment exercises, yoga, going to the gym, working out, trail running, I think the first step is just even being aware of the issue, and then you can begin to dial in how you can safely establish boundaries so that you can be an effective physician, a caring physician, a caring provider, yet keep yourself as emotionally protected as you can, because that also carries over to your families at home. If you're stressed and burnt out and tired, right, you bring that home with you, and that affects your loved ones. And so lots to say on the topic, but it's I think a very important one.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think part of what you're talking about, Mike, is the way I think about it is it reminds me of something people say to me a lot, which is, "Oh, you must be so depressed with what you do." And I'm like, "No, I'm not depressed at all about what I do." But what I do is more, I mean, I've heard some horrible stories from people, seen some horrible things. We all have. And it's almost like I have to acknowledge that suffering and give it, the weight that it really deserves. But then I have to move on from it, like not absorb it. And it has taken a lot of work to do that. And I could probably have bought a house with what I've spent on therapy and things like that through the years. So, but I need, that's helped keep me alive and healthy. So I'm okay with that. And there's a saying, misery is essential, suffering is optional. And I think I try to remind myself of that. And the boundary issue is really interesting because so many of the years that I've worked with professionals who have addiction or psychiatric problems or both, worked in treatment for many years. And I've gone from, doing individual therapy with someone who was telling me about their abuse for the first time and who was in treatment. And now this person is a colleague of mine in another state, and having to negotiate that has been really important so that I can be available to them in the way I need to be in all of those situations without feeling like I'm being invaded, or that my boundaries are being violated. And in some ways that I'm lucky that everybody who goes through treatment, professionals with addiction, they learn about boundaries. I mean, it's a totally essential thing to learn about because most people didn't grow up with very good boundaries. And so we all kind of understand that and respect that. But I have many colleagues now and friends who might have been patients long ago. Not that I sought them out, but they just are in the same field. I run into them at conferences. I'm on committees with them or things like that. So the thing that I have done over the years is I've just said, look, I have to act with integrity and kindness with everything I do. And if I do that, it'll be okay. And so that's the way that I've tried to approach it. And that's with professionals or non-professionals, doesn't matter. Sometimes I don't meet my aspirational goal. I'm not perfect, but that's the way that I try to approach everything and treat people the way that I would want to be treated if I were in their shoes.
Thanks. And I just kind of seeing the chat to attend to some of the comments. Rena had said, the demands of our profession place us in situations where we must choose, oftentimes unconsciously, to disrupt our sense of balance. And she thanks you all for describing that. And Caitlin had said, for establishing boundaries and keeping these in check with work and career, I often remind myself that my free time and my availability are two very different things, and that we all deserve free time to do with what we like and fill ourselves back up. Rest is also being productive. I love that. Thank you for saying that. I agree. Rest is productive as well. Sometimes really hard for medical providers. I don't know if anybody else can relate to that.
I find Caitlin's comment really it just hits a chord with me. But I had this conversation with my 6-year-old the other day. We were talking. I have a funeral coming up, and I said, "Oh, we're not going to be at work or school that day, and hopefully people can respect those boundaries." And she's like, "What's boundaries?" And so trying to explain that to a 6-year-old was really, really difficult. But that is so important to make sure that we have that time, that it's for us, doing what we love or spending time with our family. So yeah, I that just hits home to me. So thank you, Caitlin.
To move again, like to kind of bring up the rural or the global context, I'm just kind of wondering, how do you all approach, the gap between your own like identities, positionalities, privileges with the community that you work with? Equity and diversity is something, in addition to wellness, that we are talking more and more of, and how vital it is, especially for providers, to kind of come from a multicultural lens. So experiences with this, how do you do it? Bridge that gap.
So from my perspective, it's something I still struggle with. I'm very uncomfortable with my privilege, but part of that, first of all, is being aware of your privilege. And privilege is an interesting word because it can have, I think these days, both negative and positive connotations. I tend to look at my work as a privilege. I'm very humbled by the fact that I get to have the job and the profession that I have, but also looking at privilege as, the manifestation of power dynamics and systemic injustices within our own society. Is another kind of representation of privilege, and I'm still very uncomfortable with it. I don't like being known as the doctor. I don't like people calling me doctor. I struggle with that, and part of my own personal life experience was actually having grown up at poverty level. I was a step away from homelessness all throughout my early childhood and adolescence, raised by a single mother. And so I know, I think a little bit of the fear and uncertainty that some of the individuals that I work with and deal with face on a day-to-day basis. And that makes it a little easier for me to put myself in their shoes. And when you're talking about working with patients on a global scale, what can you say about the disparities in wealth and privilege across the globe and across the various corners of society? And I feel like, the only thing I can do that is actually meaningful is to try to be active, to try to take action where I can see it, to try to find the ways that I can break down barriers, that I can, find, I guess what I'm trying to say is, to address some of those inequities in my own, neighborhood and my own ways of life. And whether that's, donating to the right charities and right causes, whether that's spending time at, the food bank or the soup kitchen, or whether that's doing big brothers, big sisters, or there's, I think, so many ways to give back, but that's a really tough one. I think we're lucky to have the jobs we have, but it's also a reminder of the inequities. I don't ever see an individual and think that I'm better than that person. I see someone that just didn't have the same opportunities that I had to grow and succeed in life. And so finding ways to pay that forward is a way that I kind of work with that.
So, in kind of that same context, I think that my own bridging that gap for me is involving myself in community projects, whether that's kids t-ball or, volunteering mom at the school when I have a free lunch or something, like getting away from the medicine part of my life and being able to be a mom or the other things that are important to me. It's with all this free time that we all have. I actually took on a second job doing something completely different than what I'm doing in medicine, just to separate myself and allow myself to get away from it for a minute. And I think that that's really important for me as an individual and on my personal wellness, to just kind of step back and say, okay, that's put away for the day. Like, we got to find something else to do, and having it be something fun and enjoyable and something that's important to us, like community service or, donating our time. I think that's so fun for us. So.
Yeah, this whole privilege and wow, it's interesting. I used to live in Atlanta, and I have the sort of diversity, equity, inclusion issues in the Southeast are somewhat different than they are here. But I had several years that I worked in positions where I was the minority person in the situation I was in, and boy, did I learn a lot. And it was really eye-opening and horrifying at the same time. It was just, but it was really important for me because I grew up in the Southeast, and I still remember that there were different bathrooms for people who were different colors and things like that, and that kind of stuff. And just going, now I don't understand this. These are, as a kid, you're like, I don't get this, but as an adult, there's so much that's overlaying all that we do. And I have still just tried to approach every situation that might be uncomfortable, or if there's an element of privilege that I have, I've been challenged on that. And, overtly people say, you don't understand my life, you're this, you're that, whatever it is that is different from me. And the reality is I don't know what it was like to grow up as a black male in the Southeast. I mean, it didn't happen. I'm never going to understand that experience as a person who did grow up in there as that person or in that situation. But I think, being open and hearing what people's experiences are. The most recent example of this is understanding when I started working with Utah Navajo Health Systems down in Southeast Utah. And, not all the patients in their system are Navajo, but a lot of them are. And most of them are. And then, hearing my colleagues say, well, I don't understand why these patients don't show up for their telehealth appointments and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, have you ever been down there? Have you driven around there? It's like, you don't have a car, you don't have a cell phone. If you did, it wouldn't have a signal, and kind of going through all the social determinants of health that would interfere with somebody, acting like a good patient. I just was super humbled by that whole experience, that, how people were so resilient and what they did do, to help themselves, and that kind of thing. So I think it's an ongoing thing, and it depends on where you are. And I think if you approach things from an arrogant standpoint, it will not work out well for you or the other people you're trying to take care of. And if you can put yourself not in their place to, you'll never really understand what they're dealing with, but trying to be empathetic about what's going on and how that must be for people, as opposed to, judgmental, which is what I see a lot of our colleagues in medicine being with people who are different from them. I think that's the way that I've tried to deal with it.
I just want to piggyback on some of Beth's comments. I think you can't say enough about trying to be humble and trying to conduct yourself with humility. Especially in a global health context. There's this huge issue that we've been facing in the world of global and public health, of the white savior. That we're coming in, we're charging in, and we have all the answers. But it's completely lacking any kind of cultural context for some of these communities that we're going into. And while it may work in one environment, it's not going to necessarily work in that environment. And I think the projects that are most successful, the individuals that are most successful, come into it asking the question, what can I learn from them? Not only what can you learn from me and how can we help you, but looking at it as a cross conversation and an exchange of information and an exchange of experience. And, you find that some of the most successful projects are really based in community-based participatory research, where you get the community involved, let them take ownership of the projects. And that means, you have to get out of your own damn way. You have to shut up sometimes, and you have to put your privilege aside, and you have to be humble. And so that's, I think, part of the thing for me too.
Yeah, and it sounds like I'm hearing kind of showing up in the spirit of partnership and curiosity. And my hope too is that folks, could see this as a delight, to be delighted in multiculturalism, that this is rad, that we get to do this and create a space where there's more equity in a system that it could be malignant, or providers that may not find value in that. And yeah, just to me, I'm hearing the themes of you all trying to live just your personal values in medicine. And that sounds sustainable. So Rena had said, what I find tough in this work is the proximity we gain and being to realize the breadth of factors, SDOH, that add to the level of misery/suffering of the communities we work with in these fields. How do you acknowledge/rationalize it versus internalize it to the point of paralysis, detriment to our work? And Mike, I know you had answered. Do you want to kind of verbally give feedback?
Well, I think I understand Rena's comment, because and for those that don't know the shorthand, SDOH, social determinants of health. So seeing the the things that are determining the poor health outcomes that we see in various communities. And when you really start working deeply with the community, it can feel incredibly overwhelming, and you feel like a very, very, very small, insignificant part of a much, much larger societal and systemic set of problems. And I can see how that could create a sense of hopelessness and despondency, and could maybe dissuade people from even trying, but my response, if I understood kind of Rena's comment correctly, was that, I think you just use that to build your motivation. You just let that, use it as a righteous anger, use it as a righteous frustration to work harder, and never ever discount yourself as an individual and what you can contribute to even one person. right? You may not be able to solve all of society's woes or fix the social determinants of health, but if you can make one difference in one person's life on one day, then it's worth it.
Yeah, I think about just one of the approaches that helps me keep, going with working with people who have addiction is that people say, oh, well, they just never get better and they just keep coming back and all this. And I'm like, that's who you see. You don't see the people who get better and don't come back. And I learned a long time ago that I have to think of what I do as planting seeds, and I don't know when they're going to come up or if they will, but that doesn't mean I stop planting. And I know, okay, maybe you're not at the point in your life where you're ready to do something different, or that the circumstances of your life are not so that you can do some of the things that you'd like to do. But that doesn't mean it's always going to be that way. And if that is helping someone have hope that they can get better or whatever it is, I'm fine with doing that. I don't mean being Pollyanna. I just, mean realistically, maybe there's one thing I say to people, and I've learned this through my career, is that I'll run into patients after years and they'll say, you don't remember me, but you said so-and-so, and I don't remember what I said. I just was doing my job. And they said, and that really stuck with me and it's really helped me. And so if I'm just acting out of that place of giving without being consumed and being authentic and being genuinely trying to help them in the moment, I have no idea what's going to happen. And I'm okay with that. I don't have to know all the outcomes. And giving that up has been very important too, because I know that I'm like, we're all a little bit controlling in medicine of any, whatever we do. And I've certainly been through stages where I felt like I had to be, in control and that sort of thing that obviously didn't work well because I'm not in control of anything. If I know one thing, that's one thing I know. And, but being okay with that has helped a lot, but just doing the next right thing. A lot of this is kind of based in, spirituality, 12-step recovery principles, things like that I've been imbued with through all my career.
Yeah, being in control is so great. Who wouldn't want it? It's safe, it's predictable. And it sounds like Dr. Howell, like being able to shift into giving that up, but recognizing like people can thrive. They've survived before you, they've survived after you, and you play this role, and who knows what's going to happen. Like that's also really kind of exciting. And kind of, I don't know, like believing in their ability to take care of themselves is part of grounding you, it sounds like, in your work. Yeah, thank you. Oh, okay. Okay, so Sonia said, reminder that our panel will stick around for Q&A until 2:30. If you have to leave at 2 p.m., please complete a short evaluation, everybody. They would really love that. I'm just kind of moving into like expectations versus reality with medicine and the work you all do. How do you, I mean, Dr. Howell, you've like kind of talked about this, but how do you all reconcile expectations of your work versus like what actually happens? And I will say we've all been very cerebral with our experiences and the kind of talking philosophy. But, I'm a therapist, y'all. I want some like real emotional examples of when you've gone through this because, you're making it all look so easy and we know it's not. So like, let's kind of get a little gritty with this. Not saying I want you to struggle in front of all of us, but, share with us what it's like to try to negotiate this.
I think that, it comes up a lot for me because I'm eternally hopeful that people can get better from, say, their addiction. But in reality, they often die of their addiction. And it's, sometimes we can just see it happening, but over and over again, we'll be over at the hospital at HMHI, and then somebody's posted a new obituary, and like, damn, I thought they were going to make it this time. I thought that they were going to make it. And some of them really hurt because they're people I may have treated like, I don't know, 5 or 10 times, and yet now they're dead. And so I think that's where it gets to me, but that's the reality of which I don't have any control over. All I can do is give those tools, as many as I have, and try to create, a situation of continuing care or whatever I'm doing so that they have the best chance. But reality is, I can't live anybody else's life. I cannot make choices for them. I have to just give them, what I can give them. And then what choices they make. And then maybe they're not so much, if their brain is really impaired from their addiction, the choices may not be very reasonable or very healthy or anything like that. Or maybe they just had a bad batch of heroin, or there's so many things I have no control over. I don't control the Mexican cartel. I don't control, there's so many different features that I just, then what I do is I acknowledge my relationship with that person and try to let them go. And we also, especially when it's been several staff, people who come in several times, there's usually several staff members who have gotten close to patients, and we try to sit and acknowledge how sad it is, basically.
So for me, my expectations are more on the management side. I don't have as much patient interaction as the other two panelists, but I always set this big expectation for a new program that we're bringing in, or, when COVID hit, that, hey, we can do 60 COVID tests a day. And then my hardest thing is when that falls flat, not because we weren't able to do it, but because we didn't have buy-in from staff or providers or admin or whoever. And that tends to be really hard. And I think for me, battling that is the biggest thing, is being able to show value in what we're doing and why it's important to both us and our patients. And how it's going to help us in the future, set us up for success in the future. So yeah, that's kind of how I battled with expectations in a management role.
I'm trying to come up with a good response to this one. I think speaking for myself, but maybe others, that are kind of listening and can relate. But I feel like when things don't go as expected, the first person that we kind of blame is ourselves. In medicine, it's a career of constant testing and evaluation and criticism of your practice, of your decision making, of your skills. It's filled with struggling with imposter syndrome, that everyone else in the room is smarter than you and you don't deserve to be there. And I find that we're already, as human beings, I think, our own worst and most severe critics. And I feel like that's really amplified in medicine. And when things don't go a certain way, it's really easy to turn on yourself and start the blame game and start the self-flagellation and really beat yourself up about stuff. And I think knowing what you can control, knowing what you can't control, I think being realistic about your expectations is important. I think, you always want to hope for the best, but expect the worst, is kind of my motto with regards to this. But ultimately, to not let it get carried away, and to stave off other source of potential burnout by being gentle and kind with yourself, and being forgiving of yourself, and being compassionate with yourself when things go wrong. And you know, and it may be that you made an error, right? I mean, that's one of the things that completely destroys a physician's confidence, is making a medical error. And I don't, at some point, beating yourself up over something becomes extremely counterproductive and can really, really lead to burnout and be really damaging. And you know, for myself, I have a number of practices, meditation practices that are really designed and geared towards giving yourself compassion and care and understanding and love as you would want to give to someone else, right? As you'd want to give to your own, you know, parent, if you have a good relationship with that parent, or your own child. That's one of the things that I think helps me deal with the kind of stress and strain that comes when expectations fall apart, and being able to release that kind of negativity.
Yeah, coming back to your coping skills, grounding with your values. Yeah. I just be mindful of the time. I would love to open up to our audience for questions, comments, for our panelists. You can throw them in the chat. No pressure.
I just want to say, I mean, thank you so much for sharing all of your perspectives. There's just there's like so many points to potentially work with here. And I definitely don't want to take up all of the time, but I think we've talked a lot about, you know, personal skills, but I guess if you had to leave people here today with kind of like one thing or one way to kind of move forward with their own personal wellness, what would that be? Recognizing, obviously, we all come from different perspectives on this, but.
So for me, I think one thing that I would want to leave with anybody that's listening is I've had to realize when I'm feeling overwhelmed, or be aware of when I'm not doing okay, and being able to step back from that. Like Mike said, meditation is something that's super important to me. When I get overwhelmed, I have to like close my door and say, don't bug me for 2 minutes, so that I can just meditate and reset my brain after a bad experience with a patient or coworker or whatever that may be. So I think first recognizing when you're struggling, and then second, having a way to cope with that and move forward.
Yeah. So Sonia, I just want to say that, you know, the topic of wellness, again, it's been mentioned, I think, you know, as Beth said, that it's kind of a non-existent topic for a very long time. You know, you look at suicide rates amongst physicians, and they're higher than, you know, anyone else in the general population. And I think everybody needs to find a way to develop some type of wellness practice, and it's a practice, right? Just like anything else, in order to keep themselves healthy and maintain, you know, longevity and even thrive in their careers. You know, things that have worked for me, you know, as I already mentioned, my my Buddhist practice is very important, and that's been something that really sustains and informs a lot of my my approach. But I think in general, trying to have a positive, realistic outlook, trying not to dwell on negative information or negative outcomes or negative interactions, and really adopting that perspective that everything's an opportunity to grow and to improve yourself or your perspective, or to learn, and having that attitude of, I'm going to pick myself up and I'm going to dust myself off and I'm going to keep moving forward. I think it's already been pointed out here that having kind of a, maybe kind of a strong moral compass can really be a really strong protective factor. Whether that's in any form of spirituality or your own sense of morality, letting that guide you. I think a lot of people go into medicine feeling very, very altruistic, and then they meet the reality of training and they just get ground down, and sometimes they lose sight of that. And the more that you can keep in touch with why you did this in the first place, why you chose this career, this profession, this path in the first place, and just keep that alive inside you, can be really, really helpful. Having a belief in something greater than yourself, and then recognizing the community around you. I think knowing that there's somebody probably within a 5-foot radius of you that's sharing the same type of experience emotionally and psychologically, and being able to reach out to people and talk to them, your colleagues, your friends, your community, your family, just really moving past that stigmatization of, we're not supposed to fail. We're not supposed to make mistakes. We're not supposed to screw up, because we're going to, and that's unrealistic to think that we're not going to. And so being able to connect with one another and share and commiserate with those times where we're struggling, I think can be really helpful. So those are just some things that kind of come to mind for me, on how to kind of establish, a better sense of wellness.
Yeah, I think that over the years, I've done a lot of different, studies and practices that are spiritually based. I think we all get to find something that we're comfortable with, whatever that is. There's, one thing that strikes me is we never really teach kids or ourselves, we never really learn about how to be emotionally adept, in our society. We learn math and we learn science and English and all that stuff. But a lot of times, what our patients will say over at the hospital is, gosh, I wish somebody had taught me this when I was a kid, about how to treat yourself with your, self-compassion and things like that. Being aware of what your feelings are and that they're not facts and stuff like that. And I used to work in a treatment program, and where the patients named the initial layer of treatment. It was like a really intensive 4-week program, and they named it Feeling School because they didn't know how to deal with their feelings. And it was something that maybe it didn't cause their addiction, but it certainly kept it going, and they needed to learn about it. And what we decided to do over at Uni, now HMHI, recently, but especially during COVID, because we initially had patients more isolated, as we started as a group, we decided to use the Happiness Trap books, there's 2 books. And it's based on acceptance and commitment therapy, which is basically based on Buddhist principles, if you want to get down to it. And I can't tell you how powerful that's been for almost everybody that's done it. Not everybody takes to it, but, I think we need to be teaching those kind of things, maybe in grammar school. Kids that are sitting there meditating, they do better in school, they're happier, there's less, conduct problems and all kinds of stuff. And I think our society has been so addicted to this go, 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 and we're addicted to this, kind of impersonal medicine, technical stuff that is not, it's like being in love with a robot. I mean, it's not going to be very personally fulfilling. And what's fulfilling to me is I'll have an interaction with a patient. And I mean, I get all geeked out if I diagnose something unusual or do some different treatment and all that. But it really is just making a difference in somebody's life. And I think we have to maximize those situations and those experiences. And it doesn't take a long time. And I think what we convince ourselves in medicine, oh, I don't have time to get into all that emotional stuff. We'll consult psych, we'll let them do the emotional stuff. But it only takes a few seconds, sometimes, a little bit longer than that. But you can make a connection with someone. And that's what feeds me. I mean, I can go through a day that's been really tough, but if I connect with a patient, I connect with my coworkers emotionally, we're just honest and genuine with each other, even for 5 seconds, it keeps me going for a long time. So that's a kind of complicated answer, but that's what's worked for me.
Awesome.
It kind of touches on, Rena asked what strategies or resources educators can use to engage trainees in these conversations on awareness, acknowledgement, self-compassion. Thoughts, experiences?
I think I've had these conversations more with trainees in a more of a therapy situation, but I try to bring this up in with trainees because one of the things there, you have to learn all the basic stuff and you have to learn how to, do whatever it is you're doing. But how do you manage the life of a physician, and how do you live a life without just wanting to run away screaming, from the profession? That's the biggest challenge, really. And so I've had more and more conversations about that with trainees, and I think it's crucial. They may not see it as very important at the beginning, but as they get further into training, they get it.
So, Katie, I think this touches on the topic of culture building within various programs, and every medicine is a set of tribes, right? There's the surgery tribe and the internal medicine tribe and the pediatrics tribe, and they all have their own customs and their own beliefs and their own practices. And I think it's really up to the teachers and the leaders in the particular fields to create an open dialogue, right, and create awareness of this. With our particular residency program in emergency medicine, every year we have kind of an orientation week, and I get invited to actually give a talk, kind of a little fireside chat on resiliency and wellness. And then our program directors and program leaders have made it a very strong priority to continue to promote that and discuss it. We've had multiple times during our kind of regular resident conferences where we've brought people from the university's own wellness program, some of your colleagues, Katie, probably, to kind of do miniature wellness sessions, and so I think the more we're talking about it, the better. But I think to kind of integrate it into training is the important step, and there's ways to certainly do that, and it's really cool to see what other people are doing.
I just have one request from the attendings in the room. I think my experience, trainees forget that they're literally called learners, and that the the role is to learn and train, and they put so much pressure on themselves with getting it right and being perfect. And I think part of that is searching for a locus of control. And like I said, control is so safe. So I'd love to hear more of that happening, of like, don't forget you're learning, don't forget, like, this is your first time doing this. And so I love that, kind of like building that resiliency. And I would imagine coming from that philosophy of like, life is suffering and we're going to suffer, and that's okay, because there's times when we don't either. I want to get to Heather's comment. She says she's coming from a different perspective, as she's not a physician, but she's thinking of the negative healthcare interactions she has had and whether they might have been less traumatic if she had known the physician had just had a traumatic event happen. She said just seeing someone die. Is there ever possibility to help patients know how to have compassion for their own physicians? This is such a great question.
Yeah, can I jump on this one? I think this is a really, really interesting question. I don't ever expect compassion from my patients, and I just kind of live in this world where I deal with a lot of angry patients, right? When someone's been waiting 8 hours for an MRI or 8 hours for a CT scan, a lot of my job is kind of putting out these little smoldering fires of frustrated, irritated, agitated patients. And I guess I've never really expected a patient to have compassion for me. I would hope they would. I would hope that we can all be, wonderful, compassionate beings. But, I guess I can say that the kind of, thing is it's almost a little cliched at this point in time, but right, you never know what's happening in someone's life at any given moment. You never know what happened 5 minutes before you encountered them and started to interact with them. And reminding yourself of that, from time to time or on a daily basis or moment to moment can really, really enrich and improve your interactions with people. So I would always warmly welcome any compassion from my patients that I get, but I don't ever have that expectation from them. But it's always, it's nice, it's always nice to hear, the thank yous, and it's always nice to hear the, hey, I understand that you're really, really busy right now, or I understand that you have a very stressful job. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me. I mean, even just those kind of small acknowledgments really do make a difference. One of our other attendings actually had a patient just bring him a painting that he did, which was quite nice, a very, very kind gesture. And so it's out there, but it's an interesting way to kind of think about it. So I appreciate that comment, Heather. Thank you very much for that.
I was hoping to maybe jump in on that comment too. I found it so interesting. Because I for a couple of years have had these like team rules that we always talk about, and rule number 4 for our team is always assume that everyone is trying their best, everybody that you encounter in the hospital. And I always have to point out, though, for our team, that's really important. We assume that of our patients, and it's really important that we assume that of ourselves. And I think that when you make those two assumptions, oftentimes patients if you make that assumption, even if you're not saying it explicitly to the patient, you can notice a different change in terms of that interaction. And I do use that phrase quite frequently in the hospital of like, hey, I know you are trying your best here. And that kind of like, I think it opens up that channel to go both ways. But I also will say, I've never thought about that perspective of the patient seeing me after a really traumatic event until COVID. And in January, I was on service, and I had 6 patients pass away in the span of 12 days. I mean, it was really hard. And I literally sat in a patient's room and cried because they opened up that space for me. And I just, it's an important thing to recognize, because I don't think I had recognized at the time just like how much it was impacting me, but clearly my patient did. So sometimes that does happen. It does.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we have to be open to being compassionate to ourselves. When if somebody's compassionate to me, and sometimes it happens a little bit more often on inpatient psychiatry because it's like a little community, and something happens and patients may say certain things or whatever, because we're kind of going through what's happening in the community together. The one thing I can think of, the specific example, was after 9/11, I was working in a treatment program, and we had a community meeting with everybody, the providers and the patients, and we all just kind of mourned together. And I think it was important for all of us to share that experience. And, COVID is kind of it's like a slow motion 9/11, and has been for the last year. So I'm glad you're able to have that experience. That's important, but you had to be open to it, because most of us are like, no, I'm gonna suck it up and I'm gonna go on, and that's not healthy for us. But we still do it all the time.
Yeah. No, I think I think it does require, though, being open. And it's like, I guess maybe that's a good question. Like, how do you stay open when all of the time it just feels like there's a constant barrage of reasons to not stay open and to like try and shield yourself, How do you guys do it?
It's hard. It just takes a lot of practice, I think, over time. And I don't know, I'm not sure how I do it, but I think that the important thing for me is working in a setting where it's okay to talk to my colleagues and coworkers and share, things that are painful, and acknowledge that we're human and we make mistakes, or that we hurt or whatever. And that's helped me the most, to just be more accepting of those parts of myself, so that I don't feel like I have to, be whatever. I'm not macho, but that you're not denying all your feelings to get through this life in medicine. Because if you do that, that's where people burn out and get suicidal and, all that stuff.
So there's a practice that I do that's called Tung Len. It's a Tibetan Buddhist practice, and it's translates as giving and receiving. And it's a meditation in which you visualize someone in front of you, and with every breath in, you are breathing in all of their pain, all of their suffering, this thick, acrid smoke of toxic, pain and suffering. And as you breathe out the opposite. You breathe out everything that you wish and want that person to have. And you do that for yourself as well. So you hold yourself in your mind and in your heart, and you breathe in all your pain and all your suffering. And as you breathe out, you release it. And one of the larger goals of that exercise is to tear down barriers between you and other people, to really just recognize that we all want to live life without suffering, without pain, without sadness, without grief. And you can't play the game of, saying that, this person's grief is greater than this person's grief. It's all one subjective experience. And that's an exercise that I do daily. And I think about my patients, I think about my family, I think about myself, being able to tune into myself and know that, hey, I'm kind of hurting today. I'm in a bad place today. I'm not in a good headspace today. I'm feeling really sad today. And being able to show myself that love and compassion, it's, to me, that's an incredibly powerful transformative exercise. And that's something that has really made this year in particular a lot easier for me. It really helped me get through this year. So that's my own personal approach.
Trying to be very mindful of the time. Clearly, this is a really important conversation. I feel like I could sit here and listen to your all stories all day, because this general theme of how important it is for people to connect and to be really kind of transparent or authentic about what they're going through, because these experiences can make us feel so isolated, which leads to burnout, which leads to depression, right? And we're trying to create more of that medical community solidarity, instead of that separation. Wow. Holy cow, let's do this again. I don't know, like next week, you guys free? This was so great. I want to thank the panelists. Thank you so much for your time and really being vulnerable with us. So powerful. Thank you. And Sonia, Rena, thank you again for this really great symposium. I'm hoping like you guys get what you wanted out of this. And any last words or things you want to say?
No, other than I do wonder, as a community kind of around these concepts of underserved, rural, and global health, like if we should be thinking about if we could create a little space for ourselves. And maybe it doesn't have to be monthly, but just know that I think any of us who've been planning this would be open to connecting around these ideas, and exploring that more.
I agree. I think having a space like this and knowing that it was available as a trainee, as a learner, I think I would have found those spaces and looked for them and joined the conversation. There's so much to share in the moment that could help you get through. And learning from your wisdom, as a learner, I think would have been very helpful for me. And so I agree with Sonia, like creating spaces collaboratively across fields would be excellent to hear. How do physicians cope? How do nurses cope? How do PAs, how do we all cope with this and help each other out? Thank you, Katie.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. Thank you, all of our panelists. Really great. So insightful. Took away so much from today. Thank you.
Thanks
Thank you, guys.
Care.
Thanks, everybody. It was fun.
Thanks. We can stay on for like another 5-10 minutes if there are other people who maybe didn't have a chance to comment and wanted to, or if any of our panelists have final thoughts.
Yeah, happy to spend a little more time answering any other questions.
You could start a regular group Tonglen practice. That would be powerful.
That would be good.
That is powerful. I think it was interesting that
it doesn't take that long to do it, be very brief, and you can do it in a minute if you need it in the middle of the day. It's amazing.
You do it standing in line at Starbucks waiting for your coffee.
Exactly.
you guys all mentioned some form of meditation, which I think is so interesting. And that was definitely the number one thing I've done for my mental health in the last 2 years. Definitely.
In my just therapeutic experience with training physicians, there's not, more often than not, I'm grounding people within like the first couple of minutes because they're so keyed up, and it's just so nice to kind of have a ritual around that when I see them. And it's not, really complicated stuff. Mike, thanks so much for that link. I'm definitely going to check it out to maybe incorporate that, but it's so important to calm that like nervous system response.
And another one that's also a good one here. So.
Hi, this is Janet. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah. Hi, Janet.
Oh, I am so grateful to be able to attend to this surge, and it's just what I have. The things that have been shared here are just incredible, and I actually am going to use a lot of your comments in my when I teach on Thursday. It's about person-centered care. Nurses experience such a high burnout. and especially during these times. And we are actually focusing on our graduating nursing cohort. And so, particularly what you said, Mike, resonates with me because I come from a very poor home in the Philippines. You know, being raised in poverty really just driven me to do things beyond, my usual capacity as an educator. I tell others that nursing should go beyond the hospital walls. It has to go towards, directly to individuals, families, and communities. And actually, what helps me is I build bathrooms. I preside over a nonprofit, and we build bathrooms in the Philippines. I write grants, and so it's called COVID. We were able to build two bathrooms in two public schools there, and it's just incredible how something simple like this can impact the lives of children,
Yeah,
and
things,
their
things we would
families.
take for granted, right? Things that we would just not even think about.
Yes, yes. So thank you so much for your wonderful insights.
Thank you, Janet.
Yeah, thank
I can see myself reaching out to you to learn a little bit more about your module to see how we could incorporate that in our residency program. So,
Thank you. Values and self-awareness actually are the key. They're foundational.
yeah,
And you all spoke about this. So thank you.
appreciate it. Thank you so much.
thank you.
I'm going to have to run because I have consults to do. So,
Oh.
Thank you so much for joining us. I know, it was really great to hear from you. Thank you.
well, thanks for
Yeah,
asking. It was fun.
fantastic. Your contributions were awesome. So
Yeah, well, it's nice to meet you, Mike. I see your name on patients who've been to the ER, and I'm like, oh, now I know this guy. So
Yeah.
good to know. We'll have to talk about Tonglin sometime.
yeah, would love to. That would be
Okay.
great.
Good.
Okay.
It's good to
All right.
see you.
All right. Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody.